Hi, welcome to today's best practice video. So today we're going to be talking about Gitflow, and how to create pull requests and review them within GitHub. So the scope of this video isn't going to be covering how to install Git or set it up or GitHub. There's lots of tutorials out there on the internet that are very good on how to do that. We're just simply going to be covering how to use Gitflow and GitHub in a best practice manner, so that you're able to fully manage your code in a way that, one, you don't end up introducing unnecessary bugs or stepping on the toes of other developers if you have other people working on your project. It also means that you have a lot more flexibility on your code base if you're working on it by yourself. So I'd like to start off by talking about this tutorial from the Atlassian website. I'll put a link to this within the description of the video, but in essence this covers all the stuff that we're going to be talking about today. It's a fantastic article, and we're going to be following this through. So to begin with, I'm just going to create a new repository in GitHub called Git Demo. Let's make it public. So first I'm just going to clone this down. So I'm going to do git clone and then my URL. And I'm going to change into that directory. So here we're on the master branch, as it tells me here. If you're not sure which branch you're on, you can either run git status or git branch. At the moment, this is not telling us anything because we haven't actually pushed anything to this repository. It's an empty repository at this point. Once we push something up, you'll be able to see which branch you're on by typing in the command git branch. So with that in mind, let's just initialize this further. So let's just create a README file. Let's add that, commit it, and then let's push that to GitHub. So there we go. This is now fully initialized. If I now run git branch, I can see I'm on the master branch, and I only have one branch locally, and that's master. And the asterisks basically tell me that I'm on Git on master branch. So from now on, we don't want to do any work on master. We're not going to commit anything to this directly. We're just initializing this branch. From now on, we're going to be working on a develop branch, which will be forked from master. So let's create our develop branch. So I'm going to check out the develop branch, but however, as it doesn't exist, I'm going to pass the flag -b, which will also create that branch at the same time. So if we now do git branch, we can see we have two branches. We have master and develop, and we are on develop because it has an asterisk next to it. Within my terminal, I can also see here which branch I'm on. So if we go back to Gitflow, this is the setup we currently have. We have master here, and we have develop, which has been forked from master. Now, master is always going to contain your most stable code, and it should always be up to date with what is currently live in production. The reason why we don't commit to master is because we don't want to introduce any unnecessary bugs or step on the toes of anybody. And also, if anything were to happen in production and you needed to release a quick fix for it, if you've then been committing to master, you don't have the same version of code anymore that's live in production. So if you then implement the fix on here, and this is a few revisions after production, you're introducing new code again, and you're introducing risk. So everything should be done on the develop branch. This becomes your default branch, and everything's going to be worked on here until you decide to do a release. At that point, it can get merged back into master. Now we need to also push up this branch. So git push origin develop. We want to make this the default branch. So if we go back to GitHub and we go settings, branches, we want the default branch to be developed. So this is so that when we create feature branches and create pull requests, we want to merge that into develop and not into master. We want develop to be the default branch. So now I want to do some work on the README. I'm not going to commit directly to develop branch again. I'm going to create a feature branch. So now if I open my project, here we can see my README file. So if I put some text in here, save that, I'm going to create my feature branch. So git checkout-b feature /. Now I need to give it a really meaningful name. One of the hardest things in programming is naming things. We always want to ensure that the names that we give things, whether variables, classes, methods, functions, branches, that they're explicit. They convey the meaning of what we're trying to do here. So I'm going to call this README, or README details. So if we go back to Gitflow, have a look at feature branches. As you can see here, feature branch gets branched off of develop. So we're develop being our main branch, we're going to develop off of develop. We're going to commit on this feature branch. Now the feature branch is typically going to be unstable because you're working on a feature and you're working through that. You haven't got everything implemented as you're working along. So by working on a feature branch, that means that other developers can then branch off of develop and do the work they need to do, and then merge that back in without having any conflict between the stuff that you're working on. This also works great if you're working on the project individually, because you may start working on a feature and you find out actually something more important needs to be done, and you can go back to develop and start a new feature branch, work on that, get that merged back in, get that released, get merged into master, get that released, then merge back into master, and then continue working on your original feature branch before. So now we've got that feature branch here. So we're working on feature README details. If I do git status, I can see I've got my modified README here. So I'm just going to add this. Added more details to the README. Now I'm going to push this up to GitHub, as origin is GitHub. If we do git remote origin, git remote even, we can see we've got origin. Origin here is what GitHub creates for us when we once we clone this, it set that up automatically for us. So git push origin, then the name of the feature branch. Once this gets pushed up, now this has just popped up. So GitHub has noticed that we've just pushed a new branch, and it's asking us whether we want to compare and create a pull request. And that's exactly what we want to do now. We want to create a pull request. So this is a request to saying you can share with other developers and say, hey guys, I've just been working on this branch. This is the code that I've been doing. Can you have a look at it for me? Is everything okay? And if it is, let me know, and I'll go ahead and merge that in. So I'm just going to use the name of that commit, added more details, because that's clear enough at this point. Now again, if you're doing this, if you're working on a project individually, this is still a great practice to follow, because within here we can see the commits that we've made and the files that have changed. So I can review all the changes within here. So I can double check the stuff that I've done is correct. Now, I've noticed here that I've actually misspelled the word introduction. So I can go back to my code, make those changes, commit it back to this branch before I actually ask for review from other developers. So I can just be double checking the work that I've done. For this example, I'm going to say, well, I didn't notice this. Even after double checking, I didn't notice it. I've handed it off to another developer. I've given them this link. And they're going to give me a comment and say, I think there is a typo here. I'm going to put this comment on here. So if we go back to the original view of the pull request, I can see any comments here and go, oh, yeah, this guy's definitely right. That's a typo there. So if I go back to my code and I say, okay, I'm going to fix that. Put the O in, save that, go back to command line. I'll do get status. I can see, yep, I've made that change. I'm still on the correct branch. You always want to be checking that you're on the correct branch before you do anything. I'm going to add this. I'm going to commit it. Fix typo. And then I'm going to push that up again. Now if we come back to our pull request, and if we check the files, it's now saying this page is out of date, refresh. So I can just refresh this. And that comment's now gone because I've addressed it. So if you make any changes on a branch and you've already created a pull request, you don't need to close that pull request and create a new pull request. GitHub will automatically keep updating that pull request. So you can just keep working on the same pull request until we've addressed all the comments, had a second review. If everything's okay, you can then merge that in. So I'm going to assume now that everything's fine, and I'm going to go ahead and merge that in. Now by default, GitHub gives you the option to merge it, but we're going to squash and merge. This is because we've got two commits here on this branch, and I don't want those commits going back into develop, because then you're going to have a really long commit history in your develop branch, and trying to unpick that if you need to remove anything is going to be time consuming. So by squash and merging it, it squashes all those commits into the one commit, so it would just be the merge commit that gets pushed in at the end. And if I ever need to remove this feature from the develop branch for whatever reason, I can just do that by reverting the one commit rather than having to pick out lots of little ones. So that's squash and merge that in. As you can see, this GitHub by default gives you all the commit messages in the actual description text there of your commit. That's great, that's fine. We'll go ahead with that. Now it asks me if I want to delete this branch. You should go ahead and delete this branch. Otherwise, if we go back to our repository, we can see we've got 3 branches. We've got develop, we've got master, and we've got this feature branch, and we can see this has been merged in. If we don't delete this branch, in time we're just going to get loads and loads of branches just piling up, and it's going to be hard to follow which branches are actually relevant anymore. So if we go back to our pull request, and we're just going to delete that branch as it's no longer needed. And that just cleans things up. So if we go back to branches, we're back to our developer master branch. Okay, so at this point, let's have a look at the next step within Gitflow. We have a look, release branches. So I'm happy with the code that I've got in develop at the moment. It's stable, and I actually want to do a release at this point. So again, release branches. As you can see, the turquoise color here. Again, I branched off of develop. And again, you can add commits onto that if there's any bug fixes that needs as part of that release before it actually gets released into production. After that, it's then merged into master and it's tagged up. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. So I want to then go back to develop and then pull down those changes because that's been merged in, and locally I do not have those on my system, so I need to pull those back down from GitHub. And as we can see, the README file has changed. I'm now up to date with the develop branch. So here I'm going to now create my release branch, and here I'm going to call it release 1.0. So here I'm checking out release branch 1.0, and I'm again passing the flag -b to create the branch. Now I'm just going to push this up to GitHub. We go back to GitHub. It should update shortly to say there's a new branch. So if I check my branches, we've now got a release branch. Now it hasn't actually popped up here to ask if I want to create a pull request, because it knows that develop is the default branch, and there's no changes in this branch compared to develop. They're both at the exactly the same timeline. So at that point, I might want to then use that release branch, and if I go to the release branch, I might want to download it as a zip and then upload that somewhere to a server and deploy it, or using if I'm hosting stuff on Heroku, I might have another remote. So I might have git remote add Heroku, and it might be something.herokuapp.com/something.git. Whatever that is that Heroku gives you, whatever that Git repository is on your Heroku application, I can then do git push Heroku, and that will then deploy my code if you're using Heroku. We haven't set that up here, and we're not going to go through that side of things. So I'm going to assume that release 1.0 has now been pushed to production. Things are working okay. At this point, I can now merge this into master. So this time I'm going to just go back one sec. So at this point, I'm going to swap to my release branch, create a new pull request, and the base is going to be master. So now GitHub has detected those changes here. So if you remember, master only contains that empty README file. There's no data in there whatsoever. And we've made changes to that. So I'm going to create a pull request to merge this into master. At this point, the release should be stable, so there shouldn't be anything that needs to be reviewed. I'm just going to double check that the commits in there are what I expect them to be. And looking at this, that looks to be good. So at this point, I'm just going to create a merge commit. So any changes that have happened on this feature branch, I just want to merge those directly into master. So I confirm that, merge that in. I'm going to keep this release branch open at the moment because I also want to merge this back into develop, just in case there's been any changes on that release branch. Let's do a new pull request now. So develop, and then we want to do the release branch. There's nothing to change there, so we don't need to merge that in. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete this release branch. Now that we've released version 1.0, we also want to tag up master. So if we go to releases and we do create a release, I'm going to tag this as version 1.0. Now ensure the target here is master, and the release version is 1.0. Now within this description here, you might want to put all the release notes that are relevant to that release. I'm just going to say added release details, publish release. And now I've tagged up this version within our master branch as that release. Okay. So if we go back to the Git workflow, we've now covered release branches. Finally, we have hotfix branches. Now, hotfixes are for if there's a bug that's been discovered in production, you need to get a quick fix out for that. Since you did that release here, develop may have continued to have more commits added to it. So we don't want to be doing a hotfix of develop because we're going to be introducing changes that may not be stable yet, or there might not be a place where we really want to be introducing new code. So we want to do a hotfix based off of master. So if I now check out master again, then we're going to pull down those changes. As you can see, that README changes there. Again, I didn't have those changes locally, so I need to make sure I pull those down first. Now we're going to create a hotfix. And the hotfix is README typo. Yeah. Because I've actually noticed that I've missed a full stop off the end here. Now it's not, I know this isn't a bug, but this is just me showing you an example of how you can do this. So if we do git status, we can see we've changed that now. Add those files again, commit them. My keyboard's changed for some reason. Fixed typo in, introduce a new typo in README. We want to push this up to GitHub again. Now if we come back into GitHub, we can see this has changed. So we want to now merge this into master. So if we go back to Gitflow, as you can see, you branch off of master and you merge back into master. So let's create this pull request. Double check, we're not introducing any new code. No, it's got that simple one fix there. And I'm going to, again, squash and merge because it's just a hotfix. We don't care about what commits exist in that hotfix. We only care about the hotfix branch itself. Let's merge that in. Delete that branch. Let's not delete that branch yet, because what we want to do first is, this has got some changes here that we actually want to also merge back into develop and into any release branches that we currently have open. So, but before we do that, we want to tag the release again because master has now changed. So this time I'm going to call it 1.1 because it's a bug fix. Target is going to be master, version 1.1, fix typo in README. There we go. You might actually call this, if you're following semver, semantic versioning, we have major, minor, and patch, so 2.0.0. So ideally, you want to be following this as much as possible because a lot of open source software follows this, and it just makes it very clear just by looking at the versioning number whether or not new features are being introduced, or if you're breaking changes to the API, or if it's just a patch. So if this version was to change, this would imply that there's breaking changes to the API, you've changed the way the things work, and you may have to make changes to your own project in order to accommodate that. The minor version means maybe some new features have been implemented, but it doesn't break the API, so your code shouldn't break. But if you wanted to update your code to take advantage of these features, you can do so. And this being the patch version, so there maybe security fixes or bug fixes, and you should be able to update. You should be on that latest version, so you can take use of those security fixes to know that you're not open to hacking, etc. And that it shouldn't introduce any breaking changes. So I've got 1.1 there. Ideally, we should have called this 1.1.1. If we edit this release 1.0.1, we can actually do that. So let's do that now. Update that release. There we go. So if we come back to our code, we also want to go back to that branch, the hotfix README. We want to create a new pull request that gets merged into develop. Again, we want to squash and merge it. Now we can go ahead and delete this branch. We don't have any other release branches open at this point, so we don't need to merge it into those as well. So if we look at Gitflow again, we've basically covered everything in terms of Gitflow. So we created a development branch, which is great from master. Then we worked on a feature branch, which is great from develop. Once the feature branch is complete, it's merged back into develop. Then once we're happy with creating a release, we create a release branch from develop. Then once the release branch is done and it's been released to production, it then gets merged back into develop and master. If there's an issue in master, as we saw, we create a hotfix branch. And then once that's complete, it's merged back into develop and master, as we did just then. That's it for today. Thank you very much for listening.